Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage your keynote speaker, Dr. Matt Park.
Astronaut car washer. I love that title. I'm going to steal that. So there is a Korean word that I want to share and start the talk with. This Korean word is called omchina. Omchina basically means your mom's best friend's son. So growing up in a Korean household, I don't know why parents do this, but my mom always compared me with the guy next door. You know, that perfect son, the valedictorian, the person that is the sports athlete that wins everything. I remember coming home one day, and I was so proud of myself. It was in high school. I said, Mom, look, I got straight A's. She looked at me and she said, well, Johnny got 4.7. I played golf growing up, so I won my match. I was so proud of myself. I said, Mom, I got first place, look. Johnny won national championship. You know what that does to a man's ego? It's pretty harsh. Growing up, I was always compared, right? It was always this comparison to another person. And I was like, finally, I told my mom, I said, there is no such thing as a perfect son. That's not going to exist. One night, she slipped a little newspaper article. I picked it up, and I saw this guy's name, Jonny Kim. Now, if you know anything about Jonny Kim, he makes every Korean boy so small. Navy SEALs, Harvard medical doctor, and an astronaut, all under the age of 37. My mom had pretty high standards, right? So there's no way I can compete against that. So what do I do? If I can't compete against a guy named Jonny Kim, what if I became friends with him? Okay, become friends with him, what would I ask him? What if I had a chance to ask him, what's the number one thing that you would teach a group full of leaders at Leadership Worth Following? I wonder what he would say.
So I think the world would be a much better place if we could do that. So I challenge people watching this to implement that in their daily lives.
So as simple as that message might be, when Jonny says, think before you react, it has such deep meaning for me. Growing up, I grew up as a clinical psychologist, so I worked a lot on human behaviors and people, and I was a competitive golfer. I played golf in college, played golf professionally, and I struggled with the mental game. I developed performance anxiety, and I was really more about pursuing perfection. If anyone out here plays golf, we know that this game is really humbling, right? It humbles you. So there's no such thing as perfection. But one of the greatest things I've ever learned was the space between stimulus and reaction. This space is this whole muscle that we can develop on thinking before you react. Now, there's something that Jonny said that was really powerful. He said, a lot of times emotions, we try to rid ourselves of emotions. But what he means in the context of this conversation, it's not necessarily pushing your emotions to the side and ignoring them. It's learning that emotions are data. It's not necessarily something to get hooked by, but it's to understand, to get curious about. So this time that we have together, that we're going to spend, is really about this theme. How, as leaders, can we think before we react? What's really cool, and I have to say this, working at NASA, we get to say that we have friends in high places. So literally, he's in space right now at the International Space Station. He's doing some scientific experiments for us. But Jonny accomplished so much in a short period of time. And if he were to boil down the one message that he would give to everyone in this room is simply to think before you react, I think that has some merit to it. So we're going to dedicate this time, this conversation, to that message. I want to go in to talk about a model called ABCDE. This is a psychological model. It was developed by a guy named Albert Ellis, Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy, and it's a practice of changing beliefs. And it goes something like this. A, there's an activating event. Activating event is something that happens to us. So, for example, I'm not going to use a car wash example, but I want you to apply it into your everyday professional scene. I'm just going to use a general example that would work across the board. Let's say I'm driving and someone cuts me off. That moment is an activating event. Why? Because it produced something within me. Make sense? Then, what does it produce within me? Well, that leads to the B, the belief about the event. When someone cuts me off, what do I believe happened? Well, I'd probably get road rage and get furious, right? You see those people, I'm not calling anyone out in this room, but you have to see what that person looks like as you drive by them. Because you have a belief about what happened. Now, what does that lead to? That belief that you had leads to the C, which is the consequence, the emotional consequence. Someone cuts me off, the activating event. The belief I have is that person did it on purpose. So what is the consequence that I'm going to be leaving with? Road rage, emotions, driving faster, tailgating him, honking, looking. That's the response. And most people, believe it or not, stay right there. The A, B, and C. They don't go any further. It's something like this. There was a couple that went to Jimmy John's one time, and it was the wife's first time exploring Jimmy John's, and the menu, if you've ever been there, is pretty long. So it was a busy day, and the husband ordered, and they're waiting for the wife to order, and clearly the person taking their order was getting kind of annoyed because there was a long line stacking up behind them. And finally, after several minutes, she finally ordered. They pulled up to grab their sandwich, and the husband paid. They grabbed the sandwich, and the wife was taking out her sandwich. She looked at it, and she showed her husband this picture. Immediately, the husband just took that bag, parked his car, and stormed inside the restaurant. Threw the sandwich down in front of the counter, says, "I demand to speak to the manager right now." Where's the manager? How dare they write this on my wife's sandwich? Manager just comes calmly, looks up the order, says, "Sir, it looked like your wife ordered a BLT with cheese." And I was like, you know those oh crap moments where the husband, all of a sudden, tail between his legs, walks out the door? What happened? Activating event. There was limited available information that the husband received. This is called the Ladder of Inference. And I'm going to walk you through what exactly might have happened. The husband got a very limited available information. Then, all of a sudden, he made observations based on the limited available information that he received. And then he had his own interpretations of those observations. And then, ultimately, he drew his conclusions. Now, in difficult conversations, think about this. When you are going into a difficult conversation, when there's conflict, most people climb this ladder how quickly? Really fast. And oftentimes in difficult, challenging conversations, We are exchanging conclusions. And where is that getting us? Probably a deadlock, a stalemate. I'm sharing my conclusion. He or she is sharing their conclusion. And we're butting heads. And what we say in difficult conversations is, what if we were to go one rung down from that ladder? And instead of walking into a conversation, exchanging conclusions, what if we played down in this space? You know, I'm curious, Kyle. Something happened, and I was just curious. What was that? What did you come in thinking that we were going to do? What if I stayed down here and exchanged my interpretation or my observations of what happened, as opposed to saying, man, he's late five times in a row? He must not like this job. I'd probably have to get rid of him. Conclusions. You know what we say? Get curious, not furious. Curiosity is a skill. Curiosity is the ability to think before you react. Now, we go back to the model, and we have the activating event leading to a natural, innate belief about that event, which leads to the consequences, how we react, how we respond. The D in this entire model is one of the most pivotal skills, which is debating your belief. What if we were to debate the belief? So, for example, let's say, I'm sure we've all heard of growth mindset from Carol Dweck. She wrote a book called Mindset, Fixed Mindset, Growth Mindset. Now, she's saying the power of the word yet, right? I don't know how to do math yet. I suck at this. I can never figure this out yet. That word yet makes it where we are constantly on this journey of growth, where we can figure things out. Nothing's really fixed. Intellect is not fixed. Talent is not fixed. Capability is not fixed. That we can always improve. And so one of the most effective debating questions that I've encountered was asking myself, is that 100% true? So, going back to the example, someone cuts me off, activating event, I immediately get reactive, feel rage, but instead of driving faster, I entertain the D, which is the debate. The initial belief was he did that on purpose. But what if I start asking myself, is that 100% true? Is that fact that he did that on purpose? And if I can't answer that question with conviction and say, yeah, that's 100% true, then this is the exploration of getting curious. Then I said, okay, what else could have happened? Maybe he had to go diarrhea. Right? He had to go to the bathroom really bad and he wasn't paying attention, he cut me off. Could that be a possibility? Yeah, of course. This is when you start creating space. After you do this exercise of debating your negative self-defeating beliefs, then you get in this habit of exchanging your beliefs. So what happens is something happens, the activating event occurs, the belief initially comes up, but you're not reacting to that belief, you're pausing. You're thinking, what else could be the situation here? And I'm remembering, get curious, not furious. So I lean into curiosity a little bit, and I start debating it. And over time, the more you do this, guess what happens? It starts exchanging. I start initially adapting new beliefs based on that activating event. This is one of my all-time favorite quotes, and I keep going back to it because it's everything. It's everything that Jonny Kim, the Navy SEALs, Harvard medical doctor, and astronaut, if there was one leadership lesson principle he would say, it's this. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our ability to choose our response. The reason why I love this is because we have control. We have control over developing the skill of creating that space and choosing our response. All right, I'm gonna pull you all in. So real quick, just shout it out. What makes it sometimes hard to create space? Pride. Yep, I heard ego here when I was at the small table. Pride. What else? Not being present. Yeah. What else? One more. Say again? Performance driven. Yeah, being very results oriented, right? So we're not, in a time like this, right now with technology, and I know a lot of us are part of the AI revolution and technology, it's really hard to carve out time for space. Now, I'm not just talking about internal space. I'm talking about strategy, slowing down. Sometimes you got to slow down to speed up. We hear that, but what does that really mean? We're constantly going. But in high performance, one of the big pillars is wellness and recovery. In order for you to be a high performer, you have to learn how to recover well. That's a whole nother topic there. Now, I'm going to lean in to the 3 pillars of elite performance. Again, my background, working with a lot of athletes, a lot of Olympians, a lot of high-performing executives. If you think about the business world, and this is research, they say the business world has always been about 10 years behind athletics. Why? Well, in athletics, in sports, of course, everybody needs to train their craft, whether you're a runner, a football player, a golfer, a swimmer. Everybody at a young age develops their craft. Now, athletics, in order for you to perform your best and to do your craft your best, they have to work out their body. Like, look at golfers now. We used to be like pot bellies, beer and all that, riding carts. It used to be a lazy sport. But these golfers are athletes. They are in tip-top shape, thanks to Tiger Woods and how he kind of revolutionized the way that we take care of our body. But look at the trend. Athletics was on the forefront of training your body because they know their body is their instrument. They have to be able to meet the moment. Look at executives now. You know how Jeff Bezos used to look when he was in his little corner office and it had the Amazon banner, kind of like in ghetto, typography, bald hair. But look at him now, he's ripped, right? Elon Musk, executives are working, of course, we're building our craft as leaders. But the body, they realize, is just as important because they're traveling, they're constantly going, and their body needs to sustain that endurance. It's not just for looks, to go on the beach and flex. It's for the endurance to be able to operate and perform at a high level. But that didn't come until recently, where athletics was doing that for a long, long time. Next comes the mental piece, which I personally believe is the cornerstone of it all. Because you can see somebody who has the greatest technique, and we can apply this to leadership as much as it is apparent in sport. The greatest craft, technique. You can see them being the strongest, really great body, but they're just constantly distracted. They're all over the place. They're not present. Their mindset, it's all over the place. So the mindset being the control center, if you're not attuned to it, if you're not creating space, if you're not exploring, it doesn't matter how good your craft is. It doesn't matter how strong you are. This needs to be firing on all cylinders to be able to integrate everything else. And we call this the 3-legged stool, right? That's why we saw that stool in the previous slide. Craft, body, and mind. You can't have one without the other. They are integrated. Now, if we think about our leadership journey, What are we doing to develop our craft? Well, you all are here. That says a lot. How do we stay healthy? How do we make healthy choices? And that includes sleep and recovery, as much as it is going to the gym, making sure that we hydrate well. All this is part of the body. But the big question here is, what are you doing to train your mind? What do you do to train mindset? People say, I meditate, right? I do mindfulness. I journal. These are all great. But a lot of times, because mindset is not tangible, it's invisible, it's hard to train, it's hard to track. Just be aware of that. Where your attention goes, energy flows. Now, there is this whole saying, what you focus on grows. What you search for, you will find. My wife, she's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she always tells me that in life you have to hunt for the good stuff. You have to hunt for the good stuff. And she told me a story. We call it the tale of two wolves. And there was a father and a son. And the father was telling the son a story about the tale of two wolves. And said, okay, son, once upon a time there was an owner that owned two wolves. And one was called the bad wolf, and the other was called the good wolf. And every single day they competed against each other, and they fought, and one would win at the end of the day. So of course, as curious as this boy was, said, Dad, what wolf won? And the father said, the one that the owner fed. What does that mean? Where attention goes, energy flows. Every single one of you in this room has two wolves inside. One is called the good wolf, one is called the bad wolf. And every day, we are feeding a wolf, and one is getting stronger. Maybe it's subconscious. Maybe we keep telling ourselves, we're not good enough. This is not going to work. No one pays attention to me. There's nothing I can do to make this happen. That bad wolf is growing stronger by the day, by the minute, every time you feed it. Now, in this instance, food is exchanged with attention and energy. Where attention goes, energy flows. Now, what if we're aware that these two wolves are always going to be with us? We're always going to have a bad wolf. We're always going to have a good wolf. But it's up to us how we design our life and where we put our attention. Now, here are a couple things that I want to challenge you all as we kind of wrestle with this one message of creating space. The first challenge is this week, I really want you just noticing this space in between stimulus and response. There's a space. I just want you to notice that there is a space. It might be very, very small right now, like a slither where something happens and we react really quickly. That might be the case. But even if that's happening, there's still a space. And simply by noticing it, you're creating more space, believe it or not. Challenge number 2. In this space, I want us to become aware. Are we feeding the good wolf? Or are we feeding the bad wolf? What is our attention going to? What are we feeding? Because what we're feeding and focusing on, what we're giving attention to, is growing. That's what's going to win. Lastly, my challenge to you, in this choice, you're going to find freedom. And the goal is to create a space that's a little bit bigger each day. Is to not react immediately, but to pause and to create space. Here's what I'm going to do. And this is my favorite part. And I specifically designed this where we're going to engage with Q&A. So if we can get maybe a mic and going around, things around belief, things about mindset, things about anything we talked about, things about your biggest leadership challenge, your water, whatever you can conjure up, whatever you can think about, I want you to ask me. Whoever is courageous enough, brave enough, or curious enough, I'd love to have a little quick Q&A. Who wants to go first?
How do you get outside of your own head at times? You mentioned you were a golfer, so just in everyday life, you have these self-criticisms of yourself. What's your strategy to kind of create that space and say, hey, why am I doing this? And, what's the strategy behind that?
Great. The question I'm hearing, great question, is how do I get out of my own head, right? How do I get out of my own way? Yeah, I understand I want to create space, but how do I do that when I'm so critical and negative? Great question. In sports psychology, we do not talk about positive self-talk right off the bat. We don't go there. We figure out a way to teach them to, one, become aware of what their negative self-talk is first, and we ask them to get to neutral. Now, there was a high school basketball player, this star point guard that I was coaching, and it was a championship game. They had 30 seconds left on the clock. They were down by 3, and everybody was saying, give it to Timmy. Give it to Timmy. Timmy's going to score and get us back on track. So the plan was to give it to Timmy. Timmy inbounded the ball, was dribbling, and he was trying to do something fancy. And it ricocheted off his foot. Immediately, you saw Timmy's body language get deflated. And everybody on the sidelines, the coach, the players, the parents in the crowd were saying, Timmy, snap out of it. It's okay, think positive, snap out of it. No matter what Timmy tried to do, he was stuck in what we call a negative thinking trap. He was defeating himself, right? And you saw it in his body language. It's the reason is because you can't go from negative to positive. It's too big of a jump, too much energy. So we train how to get to neutral. What is that? Well, if you think about it, neutral is a place where it's a neutral stimulus that you're focused on that's going to distract your mind because you can only focus on one thing at a time. When your manager ever tells you, I'm great at multitasking, boss, that's BS, right? There's no such thing. Let me give you a point. So everybody, with your dominant hand right in front of you, go ahead and draw a square, just like this, right in front of you. Perfect. With your other hand, at the same time, draw a circle at the same time. I see people doing this. There's no such, it's like, okay, because we're split with our attention, right? Going back to the good wolf and bad wolf, you can only focus on one thing at a time. So this is my mind, this is a thought. If my mind is gravitated on a thought and I'm latched onto that thought, I'm stuck. That thought is going to breed, then it's going to kick into an emotion. That emotion is going to kick into a behavior the more I'm latched onto it. So what do I need to do? I need to be aware that I control my mind. The thought is not me. I'm thinking about my thought. So I detach from that and I replace it and refocus on something neutral. What's neutral? How do I get there? What does that even look like? Stanford Athletics, they developed a breathing pattern where you're literally counting and breathing at the same time. And it goes something like this. The point is to really engage with counting. So you breathe in through your nose for 4 counts. You hold your breath for 2 counts. And you slowly exhale through your mouth for 6. Again, 1 cycle of circle breathing is 4 in through the nose, hold your breath for 2, and you slowly exhale through your mouth for 6. Now, what I want everybody in this room to try is 3 cycles of circle breathing on your own. Take your time with it. Remember, if you get distracted, just gently redirect it back to counting. Go for it. 3 cycles and look up when you're done. For those who are done, how did that feel? What are you feeling right now? Relax, calm, reset, grounded. What just happened? This experience right now that you're in is what we call neutral, getting to neutral. So what I do with my athletes is I train them on getting into this zone. It goes something like this. Everybody here watch YouTube, right? We're a big fan of YouTube. Now, let's say I'm researching a very funny video and I send it to you. I said, okay, watch this guy changing out a toilet. It is hilarious. And I send it to you. And you click on that link, and before that guy changing the toilet, what usually pops up right before it? An ad, yeah. Now, do we have any control over this ad? What this ad is? I mean, a lot of us are in marketing, so of course, we try to get different data and things, but the consumer, we have no control over the ad, how long it is. Now, what's the whole purpose behind an ad? It's for you to engage with me. I'm gonna make it as distracting and entertaining and flamboyant as possible so that you would engage with me. Give me your attention. But we as consumers, it doesn't bother us. We're not getting emotionally hooked by these ads a lot of times. A lot of times they're annoying. But why? It's because YouTube gifted us with a 5-second timer, and what pops up on the bottom right-hand corner? Skip ad. The reason why we're not getting emotionally hooked by these ads is because we know what to do in this space. We're watching it. We're literally watching the ad, but we're not fully engaging with it. It's because we know what to expect. Every single one of you in this room can develop a skip ad button. And these ads in psychology is something called ANTs, automatic negative thoughts. These ANTs are gonna pop up. These automatic negative thoughts, they're gonna appear at the most randomest times, especially if you're a golfer and you're about to hit a shot. An ant pops up. But we don't have to get emotionally hooked by the ad or the ant. We can pause and refocus and shift and create our own skip ad button, which is the neutral zone. Many ways to get to neutral. I just taught you one.
All right, we've got one back here.
Hey, Matt, that's really interesting. Getting to neutral is a concept that helps in the moment. What are some of the other mindset concepts that you work with in your top athletes for maybe their daily life and when they're training to be that top athlete, not necessarily to just help with focus in the moment?
Great. So the question that I heard, thank you for that question, is in my work and working with athletes or high performers, getting to neutral might be a skill that you develop right in the moment, like switching your focus so you're not feeding constantly the bad wolf and you can create space and react more appropriately to the neutral zone. But what's more the daily, just practices of cultivating a good mindset, a good, healthy mindset. There are many different ways that we can tackle this, but the simplest thing is to develop trained optimism. What does that mean? Well, Martin Seligman is a professor at UPenn, and he created a whole theory. He studied depression. That was his focus, and he coined this term, learned helplessness. Now, he also studied well-being and happiness on the flip side of how do you create and cultivate a happy mindset. He did a simple exercise with his students, and it was just simply at the end of every night, you write 3 good things that happened that day and why they were good. And it could be kind of what Matt DeWolf was saying, as the small joys, the small wins. It could be, I went to Starbucks and the barista smiled at me and asked me how my day was. And I felt connected. That was nice. Or it could be, I came home and I had a crappy day. It was really bad, but it was just nice to embrace my daughter. And that feeling that she's still young enough where she wants her daddy, whatever it might be. But what happens over time, what he realized in this study, is the 3 good things exercise, after every day that became a habit, all of a sudden people were scanning their daily lives for the things that they can report subconsciously. So all of a sudden, they were training optimism without even knowing. So significantly, self-esteem, positivity, positive self-talk, positive belief, that started to kind of creep up in these people who were clinically depressed by just simply building a habit of writing down 3 good things. So no matter, this is ironic, but the highest performers in life are usually doing the most simplest things, but doing it sacredly. Like they really focus on breathing, believe it or not. Everybody knows how to breathe. Everybody, just breathe, just relax. But if you watch LeBron James on the sideline, it's very deliberate, it's intentional. Steph Curry just practicing his drills every single day, the mundane things, and making them sacred. It's the boring little daily habits, but those habits stack up in life. And if you do those habits well, that's what leads high performance.
All right, one back here.
My dad used to tell me that the worst thing about being self-deceived is you don't know you're deceived. What do you do if you think bad wolves are good? You need to crush other people to get ahead, or good wolves are bad, like nice guys finish last.
Yeah, so great. I'm hearing a lot of reverse psychology here. Like, I used to believe that self-compassion was for the weak. I used to really believe that if I beat myself up, I would get ahead. Part of it, I grew up in a culture, so the question I'm hearing is, what about you, what is this thing where you kind of self-deception? Like when I say that the good wolves that are actually good are bad, and I label them, and I have a belief around them, or I have this label of good wolves being bad, right? What do you do with that? Personally for me, and it's different for everybody, but the way that I would approach this is going back to core values. If you can identify that North Star, your core values, what's the deeper desire? I might want to win this conversation, but what's deeper? If I'm fighting with my wife and I want to prove my point that I was right, and that's kind of the argument, but what's the deeper desire there? What's underneath that? What am I trying to achieve? Do I win by winning this argument? Or is there something deeper? What am I truly going after? So I think with that, the self-deception is first, you have to understand, okay, what are these deceptions? Like, is it really working for me? Is the good wolf actually bad? And get comfortable exploring and labeling and figuring out, okay, what are my core values? And in comparison to this dilemma that I'm facing, is there alignment? So I would get very clear on my core values essentially first as an exercise. And then any beliefs or things that are coming up, I would see if they're aligned or not. And that's kind of how I navigate. I always get very clear on core principles and core values. One of the reasons why some organizations thrive, like Breeze Through, or Leadership with Following, or the Golden State Warriors organization, is because they're very clear on their core values. And they're seeing if all these behaviors and all the things are in line with that or not.
One over here.
Yeah,
Yep.
go for it.
Okay, so we had a fun conversation. So we're all operators, and I'm curious if you have any tricks or tips. Like, so people are very emotional at car washes.
Yeah.
They don't understand that they're emotional in car, and then they come in and they start yelling at us. And so it's something that happens to you.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, like, if you've got any sort of tips on diffusing things
Yeah.
or pausing, so that sort of a combination of how do you calm yourself down,
Right.
but then how do you in real time diffuse the situation
Right.
if you can?
3 words. Calm is contagious. You could replace calm with anything. Chaos is contagious, right? Anxiety is really contagious. Stupidity, 100% contagious. If you learn the value of being able to respond in a calm demeanor. So I'm around car washing all the time. We own a car wash in Huntsville, Alabama. And I brought my site manager, Hunter, who's in the back, in the red. If I see any 20-year-old, I'm calling out his age, embracing this mentality of calm is contagious, it's him. Why? People are saying some nasty stuff to some of our employees and things, and nobody should be treated that way. But if we can develop a deeper sense of belief in ourselves and who we are, our identity, and respond in a calm demeanor, a lot of times what you see is kind of a de-escalation, and they can go off, and that happens all the time. But I think the only person that we can control is if you put a circle around yourself and say, the person inside the circle is the only thing that I can control. And if I can focus on that, regardless of what's coming at me, I think I can lead.
We've got time for one more right
Yeah,
here.
one more.
Yep.
I'm definitely starting to question my definition of gamification.
Yeah.
But maybe, we all play towards KPIs, but maybe you can help an activity for our teams to maybe win at that on a daily basis, a way to approach that.
So the question, I love gamification, game theory, psychology around that. People love like being a part of something that they own, right? Helping people create this idea and this philosophy and belief that they have ownership in the decision. They have ownership over what they create. And motivation, you see this all the time. Tony Robbins and motivational speaker. You can't really motivate anyone to do anything. You can't push anyone up the ladder, right? They gotta want it. And gamification is a great way to motivate intrinsically, but if you can create ways where they feel a sense of ownership over the game, where there's factors built in where, I feel like I'm contributing or I get my say in how this is operating, I think there's more buy-in right from the start. So I'm gonna leave you all with this. First off, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for leading the way that you do. Every single person is going through their own battles. We all have our own struggles. I get it. I have mine. Whether at work, finances, relationships, whatever it might be. I'm going to leave you with this. I'm going to leave my number here. For any of you who want to connect with me with more questions or any resources pertaining to your challenge, if you text me your name and your email, I'm going to do my best to answer every single one of you. And I'm going to respond by giving you one of the greatest gifts that I've ever received. So if you want to connect with me, that's my email. I'd love to connect. Thank you.